Good morning or good afternoon, depending on your time zone. My name is Amanda Scott. I'm a Senior Director here at Capture Higher Ed. Thank you for joining today's discussion, sponsored by Capture Higher Ed, titled Seek and Deploy Modernizing Graduate Student Search. You're in for a treat today. Your hosts are Jack Klett, Capture's Director of Graduate and Online Initiatives, and Jamie Gleason, Capture's Director of Undergraduate Initiatives. Jack and Jamie are Capture subject matter experts in graduate and undergrad enrollment, but they both began their career on the other side of the desk as enrollment professionals, and they have collectively served over 75 partners as enrollment advisors. Just to tell you a little bit about us, Capture is a technology-enabled higher education services company. But just a couple of housekeeping items before I pass it over to Jack for today's presentation. Currently, all of your lines are on mute. You are in listen-only mode. Questions could be placed into the question box on the control panel to the right of your screen likely, and at the bottom there's a question. Please go ahead and give us some questions as we go along. And at the end of today's presentation, we're going to answer questions live. We will have a recording of today's presentation. You are currently in record mode, and after the presentation, you'll receive a copy of the recording as well as the slides that Jack and Jamie are going to be working from today. A little plug for next week: if you enjoy today's webinar and you would like to, whether you work in undergrad or you want to encourage one of your colleagues in undergrad to enjoy some additional content from us, we have a collaboration with Phi Theta Kappa called Transfer Mania, working on transfer recruitment. That is a webinar focusing on immediate transfer needs and building a smart and sustainable transfer pool. That's going to be next Wednesday, February 27th at 1 p.m. Eastern. So put that on your calendar or give a plug over to your friends over in undergrad. And at this point in time, I'd like to turn it over to today's presenter, Jack Klett.
Amanda, thank you. And hello, everybody. As Amanda said, my name is Jack Klett, Director of Graduate and Online Initiatives for Capture Higher Ed. This is a Capture Higher Ed webinar, Seek and Deploy Modernizing Graduate Student Search. I'm happy to be joined by my colleague, Senior Enrollment Advisor for Capture Higher Ed, and the guru of undergraduate student search, Jamie Gleason. Jamie, thanks for joining me on this snowy day in Philadelphia.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Jack, and thank you, Amanda, for setting the table here for the presentation. It is good to be with you today.
Awesome. So I feel like I am constantly introducing myself, but I don't think, unless there are any Jamie and Jack groupies on the line, Jamie, I don't think most people attending today know exactly who we are or what remotely qualifies us to talk about student search. So let me start with you, Jamie. Who are you and what are you doing here?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Jack. I'm not sure. I don't think I have any groupies at all in the world. Maybe my kids. Relative to who I am at Capture, you did probably, if you're paying attention to the slides and listen to Amanda, you realize I have two titles. So I'm currently in the process of a title change going on, but yeah, in that world, I might be considered the search guru for a couple of reasons. But prior to my time at Capture, I've been in higher ed for 12 years. I worked at a school where every time we needed names, we actually didn't use a vendor. I did it myself. And that was one of those things that kind of led me to really understanding search, the power of search, how to maximize it, and go from there. So I think that's kind of landed me in this position as the search guru. And
search guru.
I am calling in today from Philadelphia, where it's beautifully snowing outside, and excited to just be here to talk about search.
And Jamie, how long have you been in higher ed?
Well, it's 13 years, almost 13 years. So 2 directorships. I've done a couple different roles. I started in the residence life, so I've done the full student life cycle from intro to res life on campus to the alumni portion afterward.
There you go. Now, in fairness, you probably can't tell, obviously, from the photos here, of our presenters for today, but I am older than you, Jamie. So I've been in higher ed for about 20 years, 5 different institutions, 3 of which I was Chief Enrollment Officer, 2 of which I was Associate Dean of Graduate Studies, working still in enrollment management, but also working in academic affairs with an academic appointment. So we have seen a bit over our career in terms of the amount of time combined that we've been doing this, but that explains who I am.
Well, and we both look so youthful in the photos too, though.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
So why don't we?
All right.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jack.
No, I just want to say, you want to give our audience an idea of what we're going to cover today?
Sure, absolutely. What I'm thinking is that you need to go to the next slide, and we're gonna talk to the general topic of undergraduate search, what that means, and we'll start going into details on that. You know, you're right though. Let's hold on. I'm speeding along here without really thinking through. What we need to do is talk a little bit about what we're gonna cover in general. I think that we all recognize in the industry, graduate students, the recruitment practices are different. The timetable's different. They kind of treat, they're different animals. And like manner, the search process is going to be, different to that. So what I'm hoping that, you and I can talk through today is like what we're going to be doing to optimize some of those practices when it comes to graduate search and some of the nuance of the difference that we'll see. I'm hoping that we'll get to some examples that the audience can actually really sink their teeth into and say, oh yeah, I've seen that before, or that's been my experience. So, and then lastly, we'll hopefully get some some prospective students, understand how we can get them to respond, how we can get them to kind of to go from there.
Perfect rundown. So let's dive in. As you mentioned, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about graduate student search, but I think it is helpful to give some context, a comparison, if you will. So Jamie, what is undergraduate student search?
Sure. Yeah. So undergraduate student search, I think, is, we all recognize it as, well, what I would say is it's a lead acquisition process wherein we try to, grab students who are, in some cases pre-qualified, in some cases just general, market expansions, but pre-qualifications are a good part of that. We put those folks into our pipeline, and then we exert efforts in order to get them to convert, right? So that's the general undergraduate methodology. There are certainly, a fair amount of differences that we see that we're going to tease out here in this presentation, but that in general is what is undergraduate search. It's like data acquisition with hopes to convert.
Exactly. And here, people can see, we're not going to read this to you, but people can see kind of what's entailed in Capture Higher Ed search consulting for the undergraduate audience. You have some really cool tools that you get to work with as Search Guru. So I'm going to switch over here to this slide. So this is an example of some of the tools that you get to work with in undergraduate search. So what do we have here, Jamie?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think sometimes maybe the classification of me as search guru is really a misnomer, because it is all about the tools. We have the benefit at Capture of having a staff of very, very qualified thinkers, and I'm not talking about myself, that are really making an impact on what goes into the search process. And so let me tell you about what that road looks like for the partners that we work with on the undergraduate side. So on the far left of the PowerPoint, you see what we call a historical data analysis. And what we do for every partnership that we're involved in is take some historical data. We build a machine learning model that then predicts where are the best leads potentially that we need to be buying. What are the features? We call them features because they're not necessarily characteristics. What are the things that are most predictive when it comes to student behavior toward moving toward the application? we build that all into the middle screen, which we call Envision Search. And then what that does is it pumps out in the form of zip codes, some locations, but then there's also other features that are taken into consideration on the background of that. But the output is zip codes. We feed those into the search sources. We purchase the names according to the pre-qualified filters, and then every year, just like a good model would do, we cycle that back through and we say, hey, which ones are there other things that are showing up as different? So we basically have the option of taking a lot of variables, putting them into this machine and letting it do the permutations and thinking about it for us. And then the output is, what we like to see as the class, the good class, the amplified portion from search. So that is search in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I think that it's cool to share this because I think it shows, how much undergraduate student search is empowered by the technology that you and the data science folks are able to do at Capture, specifically with the historical data, the predictive modeling, and then how that influences who exactly you're going to go after. If you're going to convey the value proposition of the institution to, with the hope that they indeed do raise their hand and respond. And graduate student search is similar to this in concept, but there are some key differences. In large part, this is because there are key differences between someone pursuing just a traditional undergraduate experience and someone who is going to pursue their graduate education. So let's go ahead and just look at a couple of these differences. What you see here is actually from our friends at Franklin University. This is source data from NECS data and also CGS, which my graduate enrollment friends joining us will know as the Council of Graduate Schools. So this is some really high-level student body comparisons between undergrads and grad students. Some of this is fairly obvious, though these numbers have changed over the years as the what makes up the undergraduate student body has changed from kind of just, and Jamie, you experienced this in your work, but just from the traditional undergraduate student versus that, post-traditional undergraduate student.
Yeah.
But still, we see here with the data that grad students are older, fewer are pursuing full-time study. And then what we see here is when we add in the degree experience, we see how the degree experience is different. And more of what you may expect in terms of what you're seeing here on this second grid. But I always like to point out faculty rapport, because we see this in some of the strategic differences of recruiting grad students versus undergrads.
So, Jack, super interesting. With this in mind, and you and I have both worked on the undergraduate search, most recently when you were at Jefferson. I've also seen the work that you've done with our graduate partners, and I find it interesting when you speak about the key differences between grad and undergrad students, because they're significant. So how does this influence the way that you, on the graduate level, are approaching student search?
Well, it really comes down to how a prospective student learns about their graduate program of interest, and then ultimately decides on a graduate program. So notice, Jamie, that when I'm talking about grad students, I'm always talking about it from through the lens of the program, right? Not the university.
Yeah.
The grad student decision has very little to do with the overarching university experience. It all comes down to the program. Far more than the 17 to 18-year-old student. A grad student is hyper-academic program focused. And grad students do their research. They are scouring websites and learning as much as possible about their programs of interest. And they often avoid embedded forms where they can learn more or click, request more information,
Sure.
Discover. In fact, one of the great problems in graduate recruitment is that it's fairly common for the first known interaction with a graduate prospect to be the application they have completed. I mean, there are actually some entire graduate enrollment operations that do little to no active recruitment. They basically wait until the application comes in and kind of take it from there. And it's also important to note that grad students are applying to far fewer schools compared to undergrad. So you can correct me if I'm wrong, Jamie, but I think this still applies, that the average undergraduate student applies to about 5 colleges, is accepted to about 4. And therefore, an institution has about a 20-25% chance of yielding the student. For grad, if you put aside the med schools, and I include super competitive programs in this group like physician assistant studies or occupational therapy, if you put aside the law schools and some of the big B schools, most applicants to master's programs, which, by the way, master's degrees account for 85% of all conferred graduate degrees annually. But most applicants to master's programs are applying to one school. So the question so often that is asked with traditional undergrad is, if not my institution, then who, right?
Right.
If not Jefferson, then who? Where is this undergrad student going to go? And in grad, the question is more, will they choose me, or simply not choose to pursue graduate study at this time?
Yeah, I mean, that's incredibly true. I'm not going to disagree with any of those facts. And in fact, I'd say that probably the average undergraduate student might apply to more than 5 colleges. It certainly makes a distinction between, what traditional graduate search and modern graduate search probably needs to be. So what's the definition that you use when it comes to traditional graduate search?
It's actually pretty straightforward. And mirrors undergrad. So let me just walk you through this real quickly. It's pretty basic, I think. So we're acquiring names, right? So an institution goes to GMAT or GRE Search Service, MAT, LSAT, MCAT. If they're running international campaigns, they'll go ahead and acquire some TOEFL test takers. So we go ahead and we have some parameters and we acquire names. These are, by the very mere fact of taking these exams, these are people who are interested in going to graduate school. We then communicate to these folks. So we put some campaigns together, do some email marketing, possibly some direct mail. And those emails or that direct mail is either pointing to a landing page where we hope to collect some information, or it might even be a personalized URL. But the point is that the email or the direct mail is pointing that suspect or that lead that we acquired to some type of experience where we'll be able to get them to officially raise their hand, right? They'll fill out a form, or there'll be some mechanism by which they're saying, yes, I want more information. I am a responder. And then at that point, right, we take those responders and we advance the suspect or lead into the prospect or inquiry stage. And we start then communicating to them with calls to action around visit or to apply. And that's a traditional graduate student search campaign.
Okay. Well, okay. So I think I know the answer. But what's your experience when it comes to the effectiveness of a campaign like this?
They're not effective.
Ah, there we go. Game over. Thanks for coming to the webinar.
That's it. It's all done, right? I think you were in the audience a year ago when I was presenting on this, and I was asked about traditional graduate student search, and my response was, quote, I think I said this exactly: traditional graduate student search is dead. It's done. It is no more. And there were people in the audience that looked at me like I had just said the most offensive thing ever. But it is dead, Jamie. I mean, go ahead and do this and only do this. And this is still working in undergrad. I mean, you have some really cool tools and stuff that you apply, but the concept kind of remains the same. But you do this in grad as it's laid out here, and say goodbye to thousands of dollars. I mean, in some cases, tens of thousands of dollars.
In some cases, probably more. So what's the difference? Why isn't it, at one point this worked because it wouldn't have become a best practice in the industry if it didn't, but what's happened that it's not effective anymore?
2 major reasons: the internet and us. And I don't mean you and me specifically. I mean us, meaning me and my graduate enrollment colleagues. So let me explain. At the same time, the internet was making it easier for students of all types to learn more about potential programs of study. Me and my graduate enrollment colleagues across the country started to remove barriers to admission. So we started to provide criteria by which we would waive the standardized test or simply not require it at all. So now when you purchase a list of GRE test takers, right, because we fast forward to today, and you purchase a list of GRE test takers, for example, you're getting a list of people who have taken the GRE, because the program that they will be applying to or have already applied to requires the GRE. So unlike the majority of undergrads that you're working with, where the SAT and the ACT is, in the overwhelming majority of cases, still required, these graduate test takers already know where they plan to go. So deploying traditional grad student search is literally, and I always use this example because I like to simplify things around food. So maybe that's just a me thing, but deploying traditional graduate student search is like turning to someone at the McDonald's drive-thru and asking them, what kind of sushi would you like? I mean, they're already buying the Big Mac. Like, they're not even buying a filet fish. They're buying a Big Mac in a McDonald's drive-thru.
That analogy right there in and of itself is like super powerful. I can't even say how right that seems, and it makes sense that you're actually, you're purchasing people who are maybe already even looking at you. So if that's then traditional graduate search is dead, which you have stated in such confidence, you don't need. So how do we go from here?
Well, I think technology was part of the reason traditional search was made ineffective, but technology also is allowing us to breathe new life into graduate student search, and in fact optimize traditional graduate student search campaigns in ways folks in our audience, I think, may never have thought of before. So there are now some fascinating ways to optimize, and it all starts doing a better job purchasing the right test takers.
Sure.
So I'm going to come back to some of the things I think you discussed a little bit earlier. Let's start off with the historical analysis, because you mentioned that in your undergrad search, and we do the same thing for grad, but with some important differences. So based on the 3 to 5 years of data undergraduate enrollment is giving you, and you correct me if I'm wrong with any of this, you're able to build an actual predictive model that helps inform which students are most likely to apply. So you then have a better idea of which students to actually purchase, right? You're going to acquire those that are more likely to apply to that institution you're buying names for.
Yep.
So undergrad typically looks at comprehensive student populations to inform this predictive model. Whereas with grad recruitment, most of the focus, as I mentioned earlier, is at the academic program level. And there typically isn't a large enough population size to run a predictive model in that case. So instead, the historical analysis pivots. It allows us to look at data and create a program-specific profile of the typical student. So we look at things like distance from campus, age, gender, median income, undergraduate degree conferred, undergraduate major, years of work experience, occupation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So now when we are making the name buy, we can be far more focused on exactly who we are going to buy and adjust our search parameters accordingly so that we are matching that program-specific student profile that the historical analysis provided us the data on.
Okay, so that's a good analogy. To make use of your McDonald's analogy earlier, essentially what you're saying is the historical analysis is only going to allow us to buy McDonald's customers that are looking to eat the Big Mac.
Well, that's kind of true. To put it simply, I think if we're going to keep with this analogy, I would only be buying people who fit the profile of someone who likes sushi. Now, they may like McDonald's too, but that's okay. I at least know sushi is in the game at this point, right?
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right, perfect.
So then to go a little further, let's talk about the CRI tool.
Okay. So we take the folks we bought, and maybe even some inquiries that an institution has already in their CRM or their SIS, and we survey them. So Capture Recruitment Intelligence is a smart survey tool at its simplest. So basically, we're trying to learn where your program ranks in that grad prospect's decision set at this point. So here we will learn all of the students who are interested in you, right? Those who already want the sushi. Then we learn about those who only want McDonald's and wouldn't take your sushi if you gave it to them for free. And that's great because we know that now. So we're not going to waste any time, money, or resources recruiting those people. We're just not going to waste our time with them.
Mm-hmm.
But then there are all the people, we're killing this McDonald's sushi analogy to death. But then there are all the people that are pretty sure they want McDonald's. But guess what? Because of the survey, they're also open to the idea of sushi. So this is what Capture Recruitment Intelligence is doing. It's telling us who wants your program, who under no circumstances would enroll in your program ever, and then all those who think they want another program but are at least open to the possibility of enrolling in yours.
Gotcha. So then once that's done, where is it that what do email and digital bring to the table?
So now that we know who is open to your program, while also knowing what other program they are most interested in, we can then tailor messages. We can start emailing and digitally displaying messages that resonate with your program's differentiating value proposition. So what makes your program distinct from the other one that they are considering? So I'm going to go back to the food analogy, this will be the last I do it, but to our McDonald's crew, for example, we would be emailing and digitally serving ads about the health benefits of sushi and how that will make them feel better about their food choice. And then finally, Jamie, we have Capture's behavioral engagement. So Capture's proprietary software, I'm going to talk about it a little bit more here in a second, but that allows us to identify exactly when one of these prospects comes to your website, what they're viewing while they're on your website, along with a whole bunch more information that I said we'll talk about here shortly. But in short, you can see in real time the traction you are gaining with this pool, whereas in the traditional search perspective, with the traditional search campaign, you would simply have no idea.
Yes, no, that makes perfect sense. So I think that what you're making a distinction between what is optimizing, traditional grad search and what is actually deploying in the modern grad search platform. So what is, what's the quintessential difference?
Yeah, so what is the difference between optimizing traditional graduate student search and actually deploying modern grad search? Traditional graduate student search is really about communicating with those prospects who are known to you, right? You've acquired them via name purchase of some sort, and then you're performing the strategies we mentioned to get them to raise their hand. The thing is, there are far more unknowns than knowns, right? We know the identities of only a handful of prospective grad students compared to the thousands of grad prospects who are unknown to us. Modern graduate student search is all about harnessing the power of technology to discover who those unknowns actually are. So let's take a look at what exactly I mean, and what kind of, at its core, is a comprehensive digital marketing strategy that is the foundation of graduate recruitment. It is modern graduate student search. So there are 1.3 billion people who engage with a search engine every single day. 1.3 billion. 80% of them do not continue past the first page of search results. So our prospective students, Jamie, are part of that 1.3 billion. Mm-hmm. So optimizing search engine marketing is a key strategy for promoting brand and program awareness. Now, we have partners who are doing great things with Google and Google AdWords and Yahoo and Bing, and that's really important SEM work. And the great thing is it's not one size fits all. It can be highly customized to your specific institution. And the budget range when you're doing SEM work is completely flexible, depending on the scale of your campaign. So you're basically setting the price. Our prospective graduate students are professionals. So engaging them on the social platform for professionals is super important. And that's what LinkedIn does for us. So LinkedIn is doing some amazing things, especially with setting your targeted audience. So when I talked about kind of creating those program profiles, this is where part of this can come into play, and setting those targeted audiences on a platform like LinkedIn. At the same time, you can use those same targeting features in the social play space of professionals. So leveraging targeting filters on Facebook and Instagram for paid social prospecting. These three digital strategies, right? SEM, LinkedIn, paid social prospecting, they're all designed to build awareness and push people to an institution's.edu, right, to the website.
Yep.
You then couple that with this fourth piece, which is a strong web or site retargeting campaign. So that these other three things, these other three mechanisms of digital advertising are pushing people to the .edu. Once they're there on the .edu and they leave, we want to be able to serve ads to them to encourage a return, have specific calls to action, and most importantly, keep your institution or graduate program front of mind.
That makes perfect sense. So you've got a strong digital marketing effort to build awareness and interest, and part of search is getting these students to raise their hand and to opt into whatever the call to action is. So what are the best ways to capture that interest, to generate inquiries, especially the ones that are going to perform at or near or maybe even better than organic inquiry rates?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because you're doing all this stuff. Eventually, you want them to raise their hand. So here are the strategies that we recommend. First, capture behavioral engagement. And I can hear folks now, because there are some people on the line here that I know have never heard of capture behavioral engagement. They're like, what is that? So I'm going to explain it in its simplest form. I'm sure the product manager for CBE would want to kill me with this simple explanation. But right, in its simplest form, CBE, capture behavioral engagement, is nothing more than a string of code. It's a string of code that's placed on an institution's .edu. This code then empowers a suite of tools that will capture interest in ways that many have never done before, namely progressive identification, capture affinity prospects, and I also do want to touch a little bit on LinkedIn lead gen forms here too. Progressive identification forms, which you see here, are a form of dynamic content that is triggered by marketing automation. So remember that string of code on the site, that CBE code? It tracks individual visitors who come to the .edu. So as these visitors visit graduate tagged pages, be they admissions pages or academic program pages, financial aid pages, the progressive ID form will trigger and display. So here's an example of a progressive identification form from our friends at UTK, University of Tennessee, Knoxville. This form serves multiple populations, you can see here, from graduate to undergrad. The visitor to the site didn't need to select request information or hit a button that said learn more. This displayed because the code recognized this was someone seeking information based on the types of pages that were being visited. And for UTK, these were some pretty powerful results. So there were 26,655 forms submitted. Of those, 21,109 were completely new to UTK's pool. So completely new folks. And of those, nearly 3,000 of them, or 15%, were interested in graduate study. So these submissions were then taken and loaded into the CRM or the SIS. These submissions are now graduate inquiries, and they perform at or near organic inquiry rate. So for the record, when I was at Jefferson, I deployed CBE in this way for these progressive identification forms, and the PID rate was only 2 points lower than our traditional organic inquiry rate. So it was one of the highest performing lead sources that we had.
Yeah, and if you think about just the dollars and cents of those leads, I mean, we're talking that's $10,000 worth of leads right there that you wouldn't have to buy.
Oh, and then some.
Yeah, so what about the people who don't complete this form, or any for that matter that are still visiting the site?
Yeah, right. Because I went back. I think when we were talking about the difference between undergrad and grad, we talked about how grad folks are stealthy. So this is where the capture affinity prospect comes in. So that CBE code that's on the site, it's still doing awesome things regardless of whether or not they fill out the form. It is assigning a score from 1 to 100 of every single visitor to the site, every unique visitor. Once that code determines that a visitor is behaving like a graduate inquiry, it will flag that visitor. And these flag visitors are then provided to the graduate recruiter as an affinity prospect, and should be treated as a new grad inquiry.
And we should probably point out that that is for basically for the student who's an identified student but is refusing to fill out the form.
Yeah. So let's say you had a bunch of students that were loaded in, say from that GRE list.
Yep.
And they're coming to the site, right? You're sending them some emails. They're coming to the site. Then as they hit the site, that code's going to kick in. We're going to know their name, location, everything about them in terms of what they visited on the .edu.
Yep.
Shifting forward here into LinkedIn. We're back here again. LinkedIn's now using lead generation forms, or lead gen forms as they call them. So you can target a specific profile of LinkedIn users. You can serve content to them. And with one click, LinkedIn populates an inquiry form with the data from that LinkedIn user's profile or their login credential set. And then those leads are then forwarded directly to the grad recruiter.
Wow, it's pretty slick. So here we are, Jack. We have covered optimizing traditional graduate search. We've talked about the deploying of modern graduate search. Once we know they're interested, once we know your grad prospects are, they've raised their hand, what's the next thing that we're going to do with them?
So there are basically all types of things that will happen for someone once they are an identified prospect or inquiry. So, most good graduate recruiters out there have comm flows that are set up, through their CRM. They're pushing out email, they're pushing out digital, they're pushing out some print. But that CBE code is still doing some really important work. And this part is pretty similar. This part of our presentation, I think, is pretty similar between what we would do in grad and what we would do in undergrad. And since I feel like I've talked 8,000 hours already, do you want to explain the DVR?
Sure. Yeah. And what you see in the photo there is a nice enhanced picture of what I actually kind of wake up to every morning, every single day for the partners that I work with on the undergrad side. And I'm sure Jack receives a couple of these for the partners he works with on the grad side. But really thinking on the partner level, they actually receive them, whether it's by their market segment or whatever. But it's a list of students who have been on the site in the last 24 hours. This is a daily visit report, is what we call it, the DVR. And it basically gives us some collective information about identified visitors who have been on the .edu in the past 24 hours. It includes where they've been, some page tagging information, how long they were there on the site. There's a couple of links that'll actually get you right into their profile, and it'll take you kind of a shortcut right into the CBE Dashboard, as we call it. And as you're looking at the dashboard, which is represented here, I think you can see the visit history that's represented. I think this is probably a fake lead that we made up.
Yeah, this is very fake.
Yeah,
but this is exactly what it would look like, though.
Yeah, this is perfect because you can see on the right hand side what pages they were on, the source of where they came from, the organization, and there's just a number of little details. If you actually click on the actual date, then it's going to drop down and show a little bit further, some further information. And then some of my favorite information that CBE collects is, or that provides, it collects and provides, I guess, is the numbers that you see to the right of Jonathan's name. So there's a few different sequences there. CES and the CAI, along with the pages and visits. Pages and visits, I think, are self-explanatory, but the other scores are proprietary CBE scores. Like I said before, we have some guys on our team, some folks on our team who are extraordinarily smart and have created this scoring algorithm that basically takes the different types of visits, whether on different pages or different sections of the website that are maybe more enrollment focused or more admissions focused, and it provides every click gets a certain score. So the CES is a 7-day measurement of how that student has visited over in that 7-day period, and then the CAI, which stands for Capture Affinity Index, shows a persisting lifetime score And what it does essentially is it allows the end user, the counselor in this case, the ability to say, hey, this student is, not only are they currently interested based on the last 7 days, but it also shows persisting interest, which is, we all know in the enrollment management world that is a strong indicator of interest, and a way that, should prompt us to follow up action and send out messages.
Yeah, so to give folks an idea, when I was at Jefferson, we had an external partner providing us with 800 qualified leads a year. Add to that the suspect lists that we were acquiring via GRE and GMAT, right, to do some optimized traditional graduate student search. Add to that all the organic prospects we were receiving. My staff of 5 in specifically targeted, specifically focused on grad, they were a bit overwhelmed with trying to decide who to contact, when to contact them, with what message. So we were doing like the normal things you would do, right? You are looking at, well, who opened an email, and did they click on a link, or something like that. When we went ahead and acquired CBE and the staff started getting the daily visit report, the DVR and those scores that you mentioned, particularly the CAI score, provided them like this super quick hot list of contacts to engage in order to make the most out of what was just limited time. They didn't have all the time in the world, so it was important that they were able to reach out to the people who were most engaged at the time that they were about to reach out. And that's what the daily visit report showed us. So this is a bit different from undergrad and grad. And I suppose it's because of the role that faculty play. But we can train faculty how to engage with prospective students based on these scores. So when it comes to graduate recruitment, and this goes back to what I shared from Franklin University when we talked about faculty rapport. But when it comes to grad enrollment, faculty are rock stars when given an opportunity to forge a real meaningful relationship with a prospective grad student. And I don't think I'm telling any of my GEM professionals on the line here anything they don't already know. But it comes back to the idea that faculty are closers, and CBE provides the data to make their outreach far more effective. Yeah. And that's important for the faculty member too, right? It's great for the student, but the worst thing you can do for a group of faculty is say, hey, thanks for being involved in the admissions and recruitment process. Here's a bunch of names, go cold call them, right? So CBE takes that out, out of the mix, and instead is giving them people who are really engaged and would love to hear from a faculty member at this point. All right, so Jamie, we have given a wealth of information. Amanda, if you are still actively with us, let's go ahead and take some questions.
Sure, thank you guys. I learned a lot about how to order at McDonald's. I appreciate that.
We should say that we held nothing against McDonald's. I enjoy a Big Mac every now and again, just as much as the next person. We also have no sponsorship money for using their name in this broadcast.
I'm just kidding. You guys do a great job of explaining how it works on simple terms. So we have a couple of questions that we want to start off with, and if anyone else has any questions, feel free to add those into the question box while we're speaking. We're going to first start out with a question from Kelly Farmer. What observable differences are there between international and domestic graduate applicants? Is there any further difference between international students who completed undergraduate study in the United States versus those who completed undergrad in their home country?
That is a great question, Kelly. Yeah, and Jamie, I'm going to take this from a grad perspective.
Sure.
And I'm going to kind of give some of my own experience here because I don't necessarily know if off the top of my head I have capture partner stats on this. But Kelly, I know who you are and I know how to find you, so I can always share those with you directly. But I guess I would say that The first big difference, which we're experiencing across grad right now, is the decline in international graduate applications. So that is something that we are looking for ways to deal with and are helping institutions deal with in a number of ways, both from a digital advertising perspective and also from a capture behavioral engagement perspective. One of the really cool things to be able to do is when you're going ahead and you're acquiring names through TOEFL, or when you're setting up campaigns specifically to identify those folks who are interested in you from abroad, but you don't know their name, is to go ahead and have specific campaigns. So we talked about display advertising that exists off of your site. One of the things that capture behavioral engagement allows us to do is display, advertise on your site through dynamic content and marketing automation. So when I was at Jefferson, and we have partners doing this now, University of Toledo comes to mind, along with some others, that have basically provided for campaigns that when someone comes to the site and they are accessing the .edu from a foreign IP address, then the content changes and starts speaking to an international audience, an audience that at this point in time is very concerned with whether or not they're going to be welcomed as part of a learning community and welcome to the United States for study. It's understandable why they would have some concerns. It's part of the reason why there are a number of institutions that are partnering with the hashtag You Are Welcome Here movement. So creating campaigns and dynamic content that recognizes this is an international student, and therefore, since it's a prospective international student, they have their own set of unique concerns. And then, communicating to them through that lens. This would include wholesale image swaps on the website, by the way. So taking some current images that exist, recognizing that someone is visiting that page, again, from a foreign IP address, and changing the image so that it is one that is fully inclusive and represents our international student community. So these are the types of things. This is a couple examples of what you can do with an international campaign. Now, here's what we know, that the international students that are engaging with that content, that dynamic content, are 5 times more likely to enroll. Those that are engaging with that, those that are seeing that content, but are choosing not to engage with it, or simply just seeing it, those folks are 2 times more likely to enroll. So I don't know specifically, Kelly, if that's addressing your question on the nose, but I do want to give folks an idea of what they can do at the graduate level that really helps to bolster the opportunity to enroll an international student.
Well, thank you, Jack. One more question we have is from Raquel. Can you address how you adapt your process to account for underrepresented students of color?
I can, and Jamie, you, I know, have done a lot of search campaigns that are focused on not only making sure that we're getting folks who are interested in applying to the institution and ultimately enrolling, but also in looking for ways in which to shape a particular incoming class. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that so there's a lot of there's a lot of nuance, I think, that goes into the actual campaign build when it comes to the shape, whether it's the pursuits of the institution or the strategic enrollment plan. Obviously, I think that what needs to be considered among most institutions that I'm working with, one of the biggest things that we have to consider, obviously, is the conversion. And is the conversion going to be maintained in spite of changes that we do to shape? So in very similar ways that Jack just talked about, international students, we've done dynamic content campaigns for different populations of different ethnicities and different students of color and things like that to try to, it's essentially a process of just trying to build more presence. And there are, I think, a number of different ways to build that out on the undergraduate side. I know that the methodologies and the filters that we can get at students and more of the traditional search paradigm really allow for a lot of customization to bring that audience to bear. On the graduate side, I think it's probably a little bit more difficult, but Jack, go ahead and add, any input you have as well.
Yeah, I mean, from the graduate side, and really, I think it depends on what you mean by the term diversity, because of the graduate side, there always, I think, is the traditional lens in how we view diversity, and there are a number of ways through the targeting filters that I mentioned earlier, both with the test taker name acquisition site, but also using things like LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram, and even some search engine marketing. There are ways to target what we would consider to be a traditional constituency that would make up quote unquote diversity and shaping the class around diversity. But the thing in grad is it's important to note that at the program level, the shape of the class and a diverse student body in that program can mean something very different. It can be viewed through the traditional lens of diversity, the way we typically would think of it and describe it and therefore act on it. But it also can mean, I want a class that has 10 plus years of work experience versus a class that is right out from undergrad. So therefore, you want a class that is balancing years of work experience because you want people in the classroom that can add that personal experience to their new learning as they're moving through their program. It could mean a class that is represented by more students that are external to the institution, rather than a class that has a number of students that are basically in what would be their fifth year, right? They're right out of undergrad, transitioning into their first grad year, but from the same institution. So knowing that, and this is something we deal with when we're working with partners, we go through and have these conversations about, well, what is your goal? And I don't just mean the enrollment goal, right? We mean, what are your qualitative goals? Are you looking to expand more outside your region? This is an online program. Did you happen to know that most of the students in your online program actually come from within a 250-mile radius, which, by the way, is fairly common. So are you looking to expand that? Are you looking for increased diversity in more the traditional sense that we would describe it? Are you looking for more students that are new to your institution? Are you looking for a particular gender balance? These are things that we look at and then work accordingly, create campaigns through a number of means to ultimately help folks shape that class beyond just an increase in enrollment and growth of program. Gosh, that was a long answer.
We didn't want to say anything.
That's a good answer. So we have one more question from Daniel. We work with a third-party vendor for search engine optimization, SEO, and display pay ads. Is it possible to partner with them, they are not higher ed, on the intelligence aspects you offer for the website? Thank you.
Is it possible to partner with them for the intelligence aspect? So I think basically, so let me say this, if you're referring to the intelligence aspects as being capture behavioral engagement, which is that code that's placed on your site, that is unique to higher education. So, or I should say, rather, it's capture behavioral engagement, it's unique to capture. So if you're working with an external vendor for digital advertising, that's fine. You can do that, and then you can come to capture and you can still get capture behavioral engagement. And as those students that are being driven to your site by your external partner, as they're being driven to the site, then capture behavioral engagement will kick in all the ways that we just talked about, right? Even if you're not doing the digital advertising with us. I would say, as part of my own differentiating value proposition, Capture Higher Ed is, as Amanda mentioned, a technology-enabled services company, but we specialize in higher ed. That is all we work with is higher education, and because of that, we have a unique, I think, perspective in terms of what it is our higher education partners need. So from that respect, I would say that if you're looking to expand the way in which you use digital advertising as a mechanism for optimizing traditional graduate search or deploying modern graduate search, then I would say go ahead and schedule some time with me and let's talk about your specific challenges. And if not, if you're fine and completely comfortable with your current vendor, that's fine. Capture works with all kinds of vendors from all kinds of different, whether they're specifically higher ed or not, in ways in which we can optimize capture behavioral engagement as a supplement to whatever else it is that you're using to drive people to your site.
Well, thank you, Jack, for that answer, and thank you, Jamie and Jack, both for hosting today's presentation. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. As I stated at the beginning, we will be sending a copy of today's presentation out to you with some additional assets. If you have any questions at all, you can contact us directly as well. You can find our information right on the Capture webpage. And I think we'll end it with that. I'm going to throw it over to Jack for his last couple of words.
Thanks, Amanda. I want to thank my colleague and friend, Jamie Gleason. Jamie, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, everyone.
Soon you will be receiving information about scheduling some time with me for how Capture can help power your graduate student search. And additionally, you'll be receiving some information on how to schedule a comprehensive assessment of your graduate recruitment strategies, as well as how Capture's comprehensive graduate solution suites can power your GEM best practices. So meanwhile, stay informed on all things graduate recruitment and enrollment by visiting our blog, capturehighered.com/blog. I'm Jack Klett, Director of Graduate Online Initiatives for Jamie Gleason and Amanda Scott. Thank you for joining us. Make it a great day, everybody.